I'm going to let our wonderful panel introduce themselves. So why don't we just get started and have y'all go one by one. So Terry, year, education history, and then if y'all could please share why you chose into medicine and how you've chosen your specialty, if you've chosen. So why don't we start with Yusra?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Yusra Siddiqui. I went to the University of Houston and graduated in 2005, which now feels like a long time ago. I went on to medical school at UT Houston in the Med Center, and then did residency at UTMB in Galveston, and went on to pursue a cornea fellowship at Massachusetts Eye and Ear at Harvard, and came back and am now associate professor at UTMB in Galveston, where I practice ophthalmology. Why I chose to go into medicine, as probably a lot of you have, is I honestly just wanted to help people. I think that the better kind of explanation would probably be in the field that I'm in now, which is why I chose my specialty, is a surgical field where I get to do surgeries and help people see better with quick surgeries, pretty much, that oftentimes has them have buy-in into their other medical conditions. Treating their eyes is as a way of treating them as a whole. I think that's all the questions. I think, yeah. So that's my intro.
Hi guys, I'm Zuhair Siddiqui. I am a Terry Scholar from the University of Houston. I graduated in 2006. I'm Yusuf's younger brother also. From there, I went to UT Houston School of Public Health, where I got my master's in public health. And then I went to UT Houston, or McGovern Medical School, where I got my MD. After that, I went to New York, where I went to Columbia University for residency in anesthesiology. And then I came back to Houston at Baylor, and I did a pediatric anesthesiology fellowship at Texas Children's Hospital. Now I am a pediatric anesthesiologist and assistant professor at Baylor, working at Texas Children's Hospital. And then as far as the why medicine, I guess it's going to be very cliche, but yeah, I wanted to help people. I think an early experience for me in my life was two of my grandparents, our grandparents, passed away from cancer at a young age. And so that really introduced me at a young age to the impact that medicine can have on people's lives. And that kind of drove me towards medicine. And I had a great mentor to look up to, my sister. And then I chose anesthesia in general, basically because I feel like it's a great combination of medicine and surgery, which kind of combines two fields that are pretty different, and you have to kind of think on your feet. And the simple answer is I feel like anesthesiologists are the happiest people in the hospital, and that really was important to me. So anyways, that's it for me.
Hey guys, my name is Samna Rasheed. I currently am a pediatric resident at UT San Antonio. I did my undergrad from UNT and graduated in 2015. Took 1 year off between college and med school, did a year of working with kids with special needs, did some ABA therapy with them, and then went off to med school in Auburn, Alabama. It's with Auburn University. It's called VCOM. It's a DO school. Graduated there, and then, like I said, I'm at UT San Antonio now, doing a pediatric residency. Why? Same reason. Nothing really. It was just about I wanted to help people. I had grown up in Pakistan. Like I was 18 when I moved here. So I had seen a lot of health disparities there, just very close kind of experiences with that. So I moved here, continued on that journey, and went to med school. And I think that's about it. Right.
Hi, I'm Taylor Orchette. I am a 2014 Terry Scholar at Texas A&M. I graduated with a degree in biomedical engineering in 2018. And then I entered medical school at the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine in Fort Worth, where I'm currently a third year. I chose to go into medicine because I like to solve problems, and I think that the human body is like super interesting and so complex. And I've also seen the impact that like a provider who takes the time to listen and to really be there for their patients. I've seen the impact that that can make. So I wanted to be able to be that impact for other people as well. And I am interested in pursuing a combination of internal medicine and pediatrics, which we call med peds. And I chose that because I like a wide range of people, but I like the inpatient side more. And so that's kind of how I ended up there.
Hey, so I'm Lucas Rivas. I'm a traditional Terry from 2017 from UTSA. I'm a first year medical student at the Long School of Medicine at UTESCA here in San Antonio. And why medicine? Well, I think I just look good in a white coat, honestly. I'm totally kidding. I think it's a combination of what everybody's been saying, wanting to help people. I also had an early death in my family, feeling helpless, and wanted to do something about it. And I come from a third world country in South America called Paraguay, and I saw a lot of healthcare disparity there too. So I always figured, give me that white coat and I can fight for my community, and just overall make an impact on the world.
Well, once again, panel, thank y'all so much for being here. We do have a sixth panelist, Angela. She got out of the clinic a little bit late this evening, so she will be joining us, but we'll kind of get her caught up whenever she's able to jump into the meeting. So what I'd like for us to be able to cover next is just a brief description, as y'all understand it, about the requirements. What do you need to go to medical school?
All right, so you need a very strong will for starters, but more specifically, the requirements according to TMDSAS. So you need biology 1 and 2, chemistry 1 and 2, organic 1 and 2, physics 1 and 2, 2 semesters of English, 1 semester of stats, 2 additional biochem classes and biochem. Notably, some Texas schools don't accept AP and IB credits, so you just have to make sure to pay attention to that. And then there are also probably more additional requirements if you're thinking about applying nationally just outside of Texas. But all of these things are also listed on the TNDSAS website, which is the application service for applying to medical school for those who don't know.
Great, thanks for that quick overview. So those are the basics that everyone hears about. But what I would love to hear from y'all panel, and something that actually a number of our registration questions wanted to know as well, what do you wish someone had told you about applying to or attending medical school? We'll start with at least one thing per panelist, and then if y'all have other stuff you want to share, definitely jump in with that. And I know we have a couple of medical school students in the audience tonight too, so y'all feel free to throw that in the chat. We'd love to hear what y'all wish you had known earlier in the process as well. So Yusra, why don't we start with you?
So I would say, might sound a little cliche, but where there's a will, there's a way. You'll hear about this the rest of the panel and throughout the night, but the big thing is to decide that you want to do medicine and make that informed decision. And once you've decided, just go with it and just go forward, guns blazing, because if you want to do it, you will do it. It might not be a traditional path. It might not be the most straight path, but you'll get there.
And then I guess for me, it would be just keeping in mind it is a marathon, and taking extra time to go into medical school can feel like time wasted when it's such a long path ahead of you. But take advantage of the things you want to do while you're working towards your goal. Medical school will always be there. It may seem kind of to think about, but you can always apply, and your time will be extremely limited once you start. So take advantage of that time that you have.
I would say kind of similar to actually what Yusra and Zuhair said, a combination of that. I think a lot of people when I was applying or thinking of in America, especially when I had moved and stuff, I had heard so much of if you get into medicine and you're a doctor, you're never gonna have time for other things. You're never gonna have time for family. And I did think of those things when I was applying. And I had other friends who would also kind of hesitate to apply, and also a few that actually chose a different pathway for that reason. But I was so worried now, but now looking back, I wish I had realized at that time and maybe had felt some comfort in knowing is that everybody can have a different route or journey going into medical school. And so you can choose your own. It's up to you. If you want to make time for family, you can. It's absolutely doable. So if that's something that maybe makes you think or makes you want to do something else because you think that work-life balance is going to be not there, then I would argue that that's not always true. So just keep in mind you can do all the things you want to do and keep your love for medicine too.
So mine would probably be to like be open-minded, particularly in regards to like choosing a specialty and deciding like what you're gonna do in the future. I know that there's a lot of pressure involved with that. And like, especially if you don't know what you wanna do, like the further along in the process you get, it just starts to become more and more pressure to, I don't know what I wanna do, or I thought I wanted to do this and now I changed my mind. So I think that being open-minded is really important. Like for 5 years, I was dead set on something else. And then now that I got into third year and started doing like actual rotations and seeing patients, I completely changed my mind. And that's really stressful and really scary too. But in the long run, do what's going to make you happy. And like you'll figure it out when you figure it out, and you'll still be a doctor in the end.
My advice would be, or one thing that I wish I wouldn't known much better is that the people around you are not who determine whether or not you get into med school. So I hear so many horror stories from, academic advisors and stuff. When they see like 1B, they're like, "Oh, are you sure you want to fall into medicine? You might not make it with this," and stuff like that. But they're not in the admissions board, just tune them out if they're not supportive of your dreams. And another thing is like, have the mindset of, instead of why me, think why not me. And that really does wonders.
I just wanted to add one thing after what Taylor said was, I guess one other thing to point out is you're always answering the question the rest of your life, what you want to be when you grow up. Like right now, you might think that I want to be a doctor, but you continually have to answer that question. When you're in medical school, you have to think about residency. When you're residency, you have to think about fellowship. And when you're practicing, you have to think about the type of practice you want. So keep an open mind. That's excellent advice.
Thanks so much, panel. And I've noticed we have Angela with us now. Hi, Angela.
Hi, hello, sorry. Hello.
No, that's okay. We're so glad you could join us tonight. Really quickly, Angela, we'd love for you to introduce yourself to our attendees. So just a quick reminder for our introductions. So your Terry School, your Terry year, why you chose to go into medicine, and like your education path, like kind of what the journey has looked like for you so far.
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. And I guess everybody's in Texas, so hope everybody did well after last week, the snow and the power and water outages. So I'm Angela Abouassi. I am a Terry Scholar from 2007. Which probably for most of you guys seems like a very long time ago. And I'm now a third year resident in family medicine at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. I am the type of person, I guess, that since I was little, what do you want to do when you grow up? A doctor. Most likely that's because my dad's brother, my uncle, was a pediatrician, and I really looked up to him in all ways of life, but I really, saw how much of an impact he had. He worked a lot in Lebanon, which is where we're from. He did a lot of community service and a lot of outreach. He worked with like some of the orphanages, with refugee camps. So I just saw that through medicine, you can touch so many lives. And it's more than just, treating their diseases and their pathologies, but it's just in so many ways. I mean, the trust people in your community put in you, and the way that you can guide people and educate people and help people. I just felt like it was the way I had to go. So that was the main kind of drive. I went to U of H. I did biology, like most pre-meds. I then went to UT Houston in the medical center in Houston for my master's in public health. At that time, I had applied to medical school. I didn't get accepted, so I thought maybe the master's will help. So I did that, and then I did apply to all the medical schools in Texas. At that time, we had one DO school and all the MD schools, and I applied to some other schools as well. And I ended up getting waitlisted at Texas Tech. And after 2 years of waiting, I also applied to the Caribbean to St. George's University. I got accepted there, and just weighing all my options and everything, and biggest thing being that I saw that from St. George's, a lot of people were matching into good specialties that were in line with what I was interested in, which was mainly primary care. And they were matching at good programs, like they were matching at programs that I would want to be at. So that kind of, pushed me in that direction. I wanted to start, and I wanted a place that would get me to where I wanted to be. And thankfully, here we are now. So now I'm finishing residency in the end of June. And my plan after is to hopefully do a dermatology fellowship at UT San Antonio. So I'll be following Samna. We'll be together at San Antonio. And I think Lucas is there too.
And I was going to say, Angela, we actually have one of our alumni in the audience, Jameson, who's currently a med student at UTMB right now. So I think we have a couple of other Terrys down there too, but he's for sure, I know,
cool.
is one that is there now. So
See each other.
one of the questions I actually wanted to make sure you got a chance to answer is, what is one thing you wish someone had told you about applying to or attending medical school?
I think the main thing that I'm going to say a two-part answer. One is don't count the years, don't stress about that. I don't know if somebody already said that, but do not, have this personality. We have very big goals, and it's like, by this age I have to do this, by this age that, and by 50 I need to be on the moon. And it's very, very okay for things to not go just according to the plan. And those years are going to pass in your life, and you're working towards a good goal. Sometimes the plan gets a little off, derailed, different stops, but all of that is going to make you a better physician. It's going to make you, more resilient, and it's going to make you so much more appreciative of where you are. And just, kind of don't get too hindered up on that timeline. The other thing is, you're more than just your numbers. So probably, if you're going through advisors and they're like, oh my God, if you do not have at least a 3.999, don't even apply. I don't even know how the Mcat is different now, but in our day, it was like, if you don't have like a 35, something kind of a high score, all these things don't even bother. They're going to maybe push you in the direction of PA school or NP school or optometry or dental. And nothing's wrong with that. But if you want to be a physician, and that's, that's what you want to do, what you're meant to do and what you want to do, you're way more than your numbers. There will be a way, you'll be successful. And, it's definitely a lot of paths to get to that goal, and you'll get there.
Great. Thank y'all so much for sharing so far. So to kind of jump into the next thing that a lot of people were wondering about, Samna, can you share some things that you think people should consider when making the decision to apply to medical school? So like, what were some of the things that that you considered?
So I went to a DO school. I didn't want to do med school in Texas. I never applied to any Texas med schools because I just wanted to get that out of my system in med school and then come back for residency in Texas. And I applied, I made a big C, and then anyways, it's a long story how I got there. But I went and interviewed at the school that I did attend, which is VCOM Auburn in Alabama. And really, I interviewed at both MD and DO schools, but that was never my focus. I was never like, I want MD over DO or I want DO over MD. my goal was to go interview and kind of see if it's a good fit for me. So my school was very primary care focused. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew a couple of the friends of mine that were going in there. It was a new campus for a very old school that's been in the country. So everything was new and clean and fresh, and that always attracts people too. And it had a big airport close to it, so I knew I could go home when I wanted to. So it was a lot more than just MD versus DO for me. If you do go to, or you pick to go to a DO school, you know that you're going to be getting more of pretty much like MSK classes. And that's pretty much the big difference in curriculum. And also, I would say another thing that I considered in choosing which school to go to was I paid really close attention to how they did their curriculum, as far as like, is attendance mandatory? Are lectures recorded? Things that way. Some people, they don't want to go to class because they don't learn really well in class. And some people, like me personally, I have to sit in a class and I have to listen to a professor and it sticks in my brain better. And they had a attendance requirement of whatever percentage. So those are the kind of big things that I looked at. It checked out everything I was looking for. And that pretty much was why I ended up going there. So I would encourage everybody who's applying, because I've had some friends who went to different med schools, and I guess they were forced to be in classrooms, but they never learned being in classrooms. So say if you're going to be in school 8 till 5 and you're not going to learn anything, then maybe you might want to consider a different med school where attendance is not mandatory. Just pretty much things that way.
And so, Angela, I'd like to direct the same question to you, but really quick before she answers, Jameson and Diana, I actually would be curious for y'all to put in the chat maybe some of the things that influenced your decision-making processes too, just because y'all are farther along than most of the other attendees this evening. But yeah, Angela, same question. What are some things that you considered?
Sure. So I think the big things for me were, when I applied and then when I reapplied, is the main thing I thought about is like, where do the medical students that go to these schools end up? Like, what type of, what fields are they getting into? Are they getting into the specialties they want? And are they at good quality places? So that was one big thing. How's the medical education, the curriculum? Is it system-based? Is it different? Where do you do your medical school rotations? Like, are you at, high volume hospitals? Are you seeing a lot of patients? Are you seeing a lot of pathologies? The quality of the faculty. And I think, one thing that was really important, probably to everybody here, is like, is there ways to give back? Does this school have like, good relations with like international mission trips, or any type of like way that students can get involved early on in like free clinics or different things like that. And that's something I looked at for residency and medical school. So really, at the time when I was applying, there wasn't as much, I think, known, or I probably was just not as aware about different options for DO options. So I was kind of more focused on MD options. That's what kind of led me to looking into the Caribbean. There was a lot of stigma, and I was kind of, worried if that would be a good call overall. But I think what really helped me was seeing that, the people that I met at different open houses from my school, St. George's, had matched in really competitive specialties at really competitive places. And that kind of helped me solidify that, like, this was a good way to get where I want to be.
So she mentioned something that I think some of our younger attendees might have questions about, and that is whether or not a medical school has like a systems-based curriculum. Would one of y'all like to kind of throw out the major differences between schools that have that system versus some that don't, just for those who aren't quite as far along in the process and might not have thought about that being a consideration, just like the learning style?
Sure, I can talk about that. So there's kind of two different ways that schools like organize their curriculum. So one way is systems based, like Angela was talking about. So everything is like grouped together. So when you're doing cardio, you're doing anatomy, physiology, histology, pathology, everything about cardio together. Whereas like other schools separate it in like blocks. And so you'll have like all of anatomy, then all of physiology, then all of like histology. So it's like separated in different classes like that. Whereas in systems based, it's all based on, you know, you're doing everything about cardio, you're doing everything about neuro, you're doing, so it's kind of separated differently like that.
Great, thanks for that. I was just curious, did that influence anyone else's decision too in the programs that y'all chose? Not so much.
So I did want the more systems based, just for me, I felt like that was going to be easier for me to be able to like integrate things and make connections. But I know other people who like having things like build on each other. Sometimes that's easier for them.
Awesome, thanks for that clarification. Okay, so this was probably the most popular question we saw with our attendees this evening. Almost everybody wanted to know how to be a competitive applicant and how to stand out. And I think y'all made some really good points earlier about how that looks different for everyone. But I'd love for the panelists just to kind of share their perspectives on how people can be competitive and make themselves stand out a bit more during the application process. And again, those of you in the audience who've gone through this, feel free to share your perspectives as well in the chat.
So I think one of the biggest things about like when you're choosing what to do and like how to make yourself stand out is to find things that you're passionate about and do those things, and not to do things just to check the box off. Like don't do research just because you want to be able to check that you did research. Like if you find a project that you're really passionate about and that you would be able to talk about in interviews and show that this is something that you really enjoy, then do it. But don't do it just to like to check the box off. So because you want to be able to show that like these things helped make who you are and have like helped you grow, and they're going to benefit you in the future. And if you're doing them just to check the box off, like, is that a good use of your time? Another thing I think is like in regards to volunteering, we all as Terry's, we have like, we want to serve people, and that's kind of a big part of our background. But so in regards to that, like not all of your volunteering has to be healthcare, and like it is good to have some if you can, just to make sure that you enjoy the environment, and that it can also help you decide like if this is something that you want to do. But one thing is like if you can find a project and like stick with it for several years, and like that longevity can really be beneficial as well, in regards to like personal growth. And if it's something you're passionate about and something that you enjoy, then like that's how you should be spending your time. And then one last thing is that a common like question or theme that you'll be asked about, or that you can like talk about in your personal statement, is like what makes you different, or why should they pick you? So I think it's important to kind of early on really sit down and think about that and decide like what does make me different, like what can I bring to the table, what benefit am I going to provide, and then you can kind of tailor things about that. So like one thing that I kind of talked about in that section was like my engineering background. I talked about like I liked problem solving, and I liked like logical thinking and like thinking through processes. And so find something that you like and that will help you, and it's something that can also benefit your classmates and your patients in the future.
Yeah, and I can add on to that too. One of the things that you're always asked is, why do you want to go to medicine? And typically it's an easy question, but like you have to think about it. These are important essays come application time, and it's real easy to just kind of like, oh, I want to go to medicine because I want to help people. But then you have to think about like the other, 250 plus words you have to put in there. So I think it's really important to always constantly think about why you're going into this, and it helps kind of like reestablish your goals. Another thing that I found really important for me was getting that exposure to healthcare real early. Again, it's not mandatory. It's not crucial thing. But for me, shadowing and volunteering at these clinics kind of like made me fall in love with medicine, made me realize like this is exactly what I want to do. I could see myself doing this. Another thing kind of along those lines is take advantage of your opportunities. Go on that mission trip, study abroad if you can, volunteer at memorable places. And Terry is, really, really helpful with that. They connect us with so many service events and the whole Trouble Abroad thing. All these things are really fun, but ultimately they help you with your interview process, your application process, because you can draw back on experiences, and it just makes it far more easier to write something about something you actually did than kind of make up something, the next few little bullet points I have here are going to sound very redundant and kind of cliche. You've probably already heard, but crucial. Like every time I'd go to volunteer or shadow at rural clinics in my country back home, I never kept track of like my volunteering or shadowing hours. So like that was a kind of mistake on my part. So trying to gather that knowledge back and stuff, it's a little difficult. It's tedious, but it's important. It helps. Another thing is try to get into leadership positions in clubs, orgs, and all that stuff. Like I know all you guys have leadership qualities. You guys are all Terrys, but the med school is not going to be like, oh, you're Terry. Oh, you're an excellent leader. Like you have to prove to them that you went above and beyond. You got a leadership position. As far as the Mcat, practice exams, practice exams, if you can do them, do them. Really, really underestimated thing right there. You don't think that you need stamina for anything outside of like physical exercise, like, oh, like I only need stamina to run a marathon or whatever, but these tests are no joke. I highly recommend taking practice exams. And then there's other resources like Anki. I don't know if you guys have heard of Anki. Even in med school now, like that's the lifeblood of so many of my peers. I use it too. It's a great flashcard style resource. Highly recommend. And they have a lot of pre-made decks where you can kind of see what other people think is important. Other resources that do cost money, but I've heard work so well are Kaplan and UWorld. They're kind of question bank type services, and they kind of they aid you with studying for the Mcat, and then come med school too. They help with STEP. Like it's a very diverse and very good program, like investment if you're thinking about doing that. And then lastly, setting a study schedule. Set goals for yourself every day that are realistic when studying for the Mcat. It's real easy to just kind of like see the Mcat from afar and be like, okay, I know I have to get there, but every day you have to be kind of progressing towards it. I think that's really important to kind of set a schedule and set goals for yourself.
Yeah, to go along with what Lucas is saying, so a little bit specific for my Mcat, I did Kaplan, and I think it's really important set schedule. Like I basically month where I was like in lockdown over the summer, and it's just like what I did all day, every day. Just went to the UH library. I studied there the entire day. I did practice tests. Basically made a whole schedule over the course of a month leading up to the exam. Everyone has their own way of developing how they take the test, but that's how I did it specifically. But also just taking as many practice exams as possible. I said earlier, I was a reapplicant, so some mistakes I made that you guys should learn from. I took with the Mcat the first time before I took physics, and so I think for me personally that kind of hurt me because that was like one of the sections I struggled in because I hadn't taken the course, and it's kind of hard to teach yourself the subject off of Kaplan alone. And so I retook the Mcat, and then by the time it was kind of like past the application cycle. So that kind of was one of those things that kind of I shot myself in the foot because of that. Kind of keep that in mind when you are of timing it with your application and the admission cycle, because that can kind of set you back. And then in addition, making yourself a competitive applicant in general, everything is balanced. So really the big thing they're looking at includes like your GPA and your Mcat, the classes you do and the service that you do. So you know yourself better than anyone. If you don't get in the first time, then take a critical look at your application. If you think your GPA is a little bit low, then you could do graduate school. I also did the MPH classes. Within my MPH, applied both GPA and my science GPA, which also made things look better for me. And then, you know, if your MCAT is low, and consider retaking the MCAT. I wouldn't say take it like 5 times because that will count against you. But if you feel like the first time you took it, your score could have been better, and that's something that can help you can improve, then, you know, you'll just have to, if you're to go through it all over again to study for it and build your way up taking it, then I would say do that. Also, don't, like, I've met many people who would study for the MCAT for like 6 months. And for me, that is like time to continually burn yourself out. You really build your way up to it and as a focused like time to be able to study and do it. Let's see here. And then get feedback that you get on your application. Time around, you got no interviews. That tells you have a little bit of work to do. So you have to look at multiple parts of your application, see why you didn't get any interviews, and then go from there. And then if you've gotten several interviews and you got waitlisted at a bunch of places, that means you're closer. So that means that, you know, you need to fine tune a couple of things. Maybe one component of your application is a little weaker than others. And you can focus on that in your time before you reapply. You can, additionally, a lot of people have very different backgrounds. I didn't mention this earlier, but I did political science. And I know Taylor mentioned being an engineer. I know Yusra did psychology. If you lean into your differences, that also sets you apart. And that can help you in the application process because you provide a different perspective and your experiences are very different. So additionally, other things you can do to have your application, international medical mission trips are always a great option. Things that you might not necessarily be able to do when you're busy with school. If you have time off in between, and that's something that I went to Honduras, for example. I did a medical mission trip there, and I also did medical mission trips in the U.S. as well. I think those are all things that can help.
So just quick question, since we were just talking about the MCAT, one of our audience members wanted to know if people have recommendations for when you should start studying to take it. And I'm assuming you meant when you were asking your question, like not just how far out, maybe how far out from the test, or like once you've decided that's the path you're taking, like when do you kind of pick that up? So I'm curious, like when did all of y'all start studying, or people in the audience too, like what did that timeline look like for you?
So the first time I took it, I started studying the summer before my junior year because I hadn't taken physics, so I remember. And then I ended up taking it midway through junior year. But then when I was reapplying, I basically studied the summer after junior year and worked my way up. It's me.
So I took the like in-person Kaplan course once a week, starting in like September or October of my junior year. And I didn't really study before that. And during that time, I pretty much like only did the course. I didn't do anything like that, anything else. And at that time, UWorld for the MCAT wasn't really a thing yet. And then I ended up taking my test in January, and I kind of like really studied hard over Christmas break.
I gave myself like 4 months to study for it, and I think I did in the fall of junior year, I believe, and then I took it this spring. And I thought that was ample time, but you always feel like you're not ready, but you're ready.
So Yusra, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you in terms of what people can do to be competitive applicants, since you play a role in admissions currently. So would definitely love your input. And then somebody did ask a question regarding reapplication and whether or not it's common for people to reapply, and if should people be discouraged or not if they have to reapply.
I would say, to speak to the reapplicant question first, to echo what others have said, if you have to reapply, and even what I said in the beginning, if you know this is what you want to do it. If you have to reapply, do not submit the same application. That is a useless it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of the reviewers' time. Think about where you can look at your application and strengthen it. So, if you don't know why you didn't get in, then have someone look at it. The people on the panel are your fellow Terrys. There are plenty of people on Terry Connect that you can reach out to. They'll be happy to help you and figure out where you fell short. To echo what Taylor said, figure out things that you want to do as a way to show your passions and interests in your application, and figure out those things rather than just filling your application or filling your resume. But also realize that you do need a lot of different boxes on your resume. So it's not that, I don't like research, so I'm not going to do it. No, you should figure out where you can mesh your passions and research. So figure out a way to bring out your passions in the requirements, and it can be creative ways. People figure out a lot of different ways to make their interests shine, and that comes out on their application. And to speak, I think some of the questions were also about opportunities lost during the pandemic, and that is something that, from a reviewer standpoint, people know that as well. We know, our clinics are affected by the pandemic. So if it's something like that, don't worry if it's something that is an understandable situation, but do know that there are people out there who are hustling to figure out how to make themselves shine even during a pandemic. They are figuring out how to volunteer. They're figuring out how to do things remotely. So if you can't think of anything on your own, just Google and figure out where you can help out, because I assure you there are people doing something that you can help with. And that is something that you could do even at the time of the pandemic. So I would say that the caveat is that all of us are affected by the pandemic, and know that that's the case, but that doesn't mean that you can use that as an excuse on your application as, I couldn't do anything because of the pandemic. So figure out where you can strengthen your application, figure out what it is that you can make shine on your application. Another thing which I don't think was touched on is the personal statement. I know Lucas mentioned the importance of the personal statement, but use it either to your advantage to shine, to show where you shine in your application. Use it to show if you have weak spots in your application, because they will see them. You might as well get ahead of them and address why you have weak spots on your application. So you can really use your personal statement as a way to enhance your application, whether it's to explain something or to make sure that they really see something on your application. And lastly, make sure someone reads your personal statement, because it is kind of a little bit discouraging when you see a personal statement that looks like nobody has proofread it and nobody has really read it for the applicant. Maybe it makes sense to you, but it doesn't have to be someone that you're intimidated to have read it, but have someone read it. And they don't even have to be in medicine. It should at least be some sort of story that someone can follow, whether or not they're in medicine. So make sure that you have that proofread and use it to your advantage. And I think those would probably be the main points.
So we did get some questions regarding how a gap year is perceived, and if the panel has any advice on that. So I know a couple of you mentioned that y'all had kind of a gap between whenever you started medical school and when you finished your undergrad, but I'll start again with you, Yusra. What does that look like to somebody who's on a review, like on the committee reviewing that stuff? What do y'all look for when you've seen that someone has taken a gap year?
I think it depends on what happened during that year. And if it's somebody who wanted to take time off because they wanted to go work in Africa for a year, that is something that, should definitely be highlighted on your application. If it's, I didn't get into med school and I didn't want to do anything else and I just reapplied with the same application, probably won't look good. So if you took time to either pursue your passions or to strengthen your application, I don't think it's a bad thing. And it can only show that you're really dedicated to this field.
So another question that came in was, how are summer classes perceived? So if you took some of your major requirements during the summer instead of during the regular semester, does that impact a committee's viewpoint at all?
I think it depends on It doesn't have to be that if it was taken during the summer, it's a bad thing, especially if you're trying to be strategic and in completing requirements. I would say that I think sometimes people try to cram in a lot of things to either apply super early and things like that. But from a review standpoint, I would say sometimes people do even look twice if someone's applying without having, what's the best way to put this? That if you're applying without kind of going the traditional path and you're speeding everything up in terms of maturity and things like that. So don't think of it that if I get everything done early and apply super early, I'm going to look really, really good. That's not always the case. A lot of times the people reviewing your applications will look at your maturity as a student and as a human that occurs over time as you progress in life. So don't feel stressed about, I need to cram everything in. And if taking a class here or there in the summer is helpful in some other way, then it makes sense, but you don't want to just cram everything in to get it done super quickly.
And kind of just to add to that, so since I did the engineering major, a lot of the like requirements weren't in my degree plan, so I had to take them like extra. So those are the classes that I took in the summer. So I had to take classes every summer, and like between my freshman year and sophomore year, I took classes just at like a community college back home, so I could live at home and save money. But then my next summers, I took classes at A&M over the summer once it was kind of more of like the higher level. Like I took OChem 2 and things like that over the summer, just since they weren't in my degree plan. So I think that it's definitely still fine to take classes over the summer, but don't do it just because you're trying to rush.
Okay, so to switch gears a little bit, panel, someone wanted to know about how y'all funded your medical school education, and if you have any advice or tips about those expenses after college and kind of figuring that out, and paying for other things too, like your personal expenses while going through medical school.
I can start. So I was very fortunate in that Zuhair and I our parents live in Houston. So the years that I was not on campus, I stayed at home and I saved a lot of money being a Terry and being fortunate to have, everything paid for. So honestly, that helped a lot with saving that money and putting it towards medical school, and helped prevented me from having to worry a lot about financing school. The other thing about Texas schools is that the tuition is lower than a lot of other schools, so it's not as much of a financial burden as if you're going out of state.
Yeah, I think similarly, especially when I went to New York, I realized the difference. For example, medical students at Columbia pay anywhere from 70 to 100,000 a year to go to medical school there, with room and board, living in the city, cost of expenses. And in Texas, I lived in Houston. I went to UT Houston medical school. When I was there, cost about 15, and I think now it's around 20. So that goes a very long way, saving money from Terry. And then I did during fourth year, you have like a lot of free time during fourth year medical school, and so I actually ended up working at that point to help save up with money as well, to help offset the cost of everything as well. Yeah.
Also, so I pay completely through loans for my school, and I know that coming in, I was like really nervous about that, since I didn't take out loans in undergrad, so I didn't really know anything about that process or about how to do like anything regarding loans. And I think a really good thing to do for that, because y'all are all like in the same boat, is to contact like the financial aid department at your school, because they are like super great and like they deal with this kind of thing all of the time. So like definitely reach out to the financial aid department too, and like they can help you determine like if the amount of loan you need is enough, or like if you need these other loans. And so I think that they're like a really great resource to use.
I definitely agree with what Taylor said, is like any school that you go to is going to have a great financial aid department. One thing too is that a lot of programs, like when you start residency and beyond, there is a lot of loan forgiveness out there. There's a lot of nuances with that, but especially if you go into like primary care, there is a lot of places that you can go, and they don't always have to be like very rural or far off places. Even sometimes like a place that's like closer to home. Working at like a non-for-profit place, like for example, like UTMB is not for profit, like that counts. So you as a resident can make income-based repayments. So your payments are much smaller. And then even when you do get a job later after residency, you can try to get into one of those loan forgiveness programs where sometimes you pay for several years, but then the amount remaining, because the interest is really what kills you with a lot of these loans, the amount remaining after like the 10-year mark usually will be forgiven. So that's something to look into: income driven repayments and then loan forgiveness programs, because it can feel like a lot, because all of us were very blessed that we didn't have any of that in undergrad. And when I meet people that had it from undergrad and medical school, it's so much worse. But it can be a lot, but don't let that really worry you too much right now, because there is loans through FAFSA, and there will be ways to manage it later on.
So as is usually the case, we're getting towards the end of our hour. Time always flies whenever you get a group of Terrys together talking about what they know. I did have one final question that was submitted both in the registrations, and a couple of people actually asked it in the private messages. For those of you that have gone through your residency, just really quickly, can y'all talk about how the location of your residency ultimately came about for you, and just what did that process look like for you? Because I know we do have a few people that have already gone through the process of getting into medical school that would probably really like to hear from that perspective these last few minutes.
I can start again. So for residency, I would say it's very specialty driven. For myself, being an ophthalmologist, there are very small programs around the country. So these are 4 is an average number of people per year in a given hospital. So ultimately for residency, it is a little bit more dependent on where you get in. It's a match process. So for myself, I wanted to stay in Texas, so I was fortunate to be able to go to UTMB. I think fellowship is where you get to decide more about geography, and that is a big component of you get to decide. It's more like people that have real jobs where they get to pick where they're going. So you will have that at some point in your life, but I think specialty that you're going into will determine how competitive it is. If you're choosing a specialty that is a little bit more readily available in places, you'll have a little bit more opportunity to go maybe wherever you want.
I would say, because obviously I applied for pediatrics, and there's ample amount of programs for that all throughout the country and all states. But what I was really looking for when I was even going through the process of just applying and how I ranked my list and everything, I wanted to be close to home, but not super close, but close enough. Like, I'm in San Antonio, my parents live in Houston, I go home all the time. But I will say my friends who did want to really adventure out during residency, and then they ended up being in New York and New Jersey and Michigan and I don't know, all these places, they all really miss their family, and residency can be very lonely and very tough. So I would say for sure try to consider areas where at least you have somebody that you can go to easily without having to fly and having to have a lot of time off to be able to get on a plane and come back in time. So I would say those would be the big things to consider. I'm really happy where I am because I see my mom all the time. So
as far as my residency process, it took me a while to figure out that I want to do anesthesia. I thought I was going to do ENT for a while, and then I ended up changing my mind. But in general, kind of echoing what Yusra said about what specialty you're interested in kind of dictates how well you have to do in medical school. Some of the more competitive subspecialties, you really have to grind really hard, and kind of that can help determine your focus of what ends up happening. As far as for me personally, my entire life took place in Houston. I'm from Houston. I went to college and med school and did my MPH there. I wanted to do something very different. I wanted to go to a great program. I wanted a very different experience. And I really wanted to go somewhere that could be able to open up a lot of opportunities for me. And so then for me, I wasn't entirely sure during my residency, my interview process, where I was going to end up going. I was very much surprised and thrilled to be able to go interview in New York. And I loved the program. I thought it was everything that I was looking for in terms of being a trainee and the kind of program specialty specific things that I was looking for. And it's also helping with being able to help develop as a clinician, develop as a person, and kind of head in the way that I wanted to go. And really, ultimately, the thing about residency is what doors will it open for you once you're done. And for me, that was like one of the things that I wanted. And so when I wanted to go to trip, I basically where I would go and go from there.
And I'll just real quick tell you guys about my path. So I applied to family medicine. Like Samna said, it's very like large programs. There's a lot of programs out there. So I was more like geographically thinking. I had been away, for school and my rotations. And I'm like Zuhair and Yusra. I'm like everything, all my life's in Houston. So when I left for medical school, I really, really wanted to get back here. And when I interviewed, I tried to focus on all the programs in Texas. With a lot of primary care specialties, like a lot of them can be rural versus like community-based versus hospital-based. So that's something you can think about. I'm very happy at UTMB because one, it's part of the UT system. So it's like a very large institution with a ton of resources, but because we're in Galveston, I feel like we do still get a little bit of that like small town feel. So I feel like it was a really good fit. And I saw that residents graduating were getting into the fellowships they wanted or getting the jobs they wanted. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to do fellowship or not, but I felt like it'd be a good launch pad. If I did want to go into fellowship, I feel like having like that university name and that training, that really robust training, really helped you either way you wanted to go.
Well, panel, this is it. We're at the end of our hour. Everyone, this is obviously something that you can spend a ton of time talking with someone about because it's such an individual experience. And one of the things that I just want to encourage all of you to do, first of all, is take the time to thank our panel for giving their time to both prepare for tonight and then share their perspectives with us this evening. In your reminder email and then in the follow-up email, I'm going to provide a PDF with everybody's bio. It also has their contact information. So they have all pledged to give back, and part of that is making themselves available to you. So if you have questions about anything from tonight, please feel free to reach out to the panelists. That's what they're here for. But also keep in mind that on Terry Connect, there are a lot of other Terry scholars that are in the medical field at varying degrees in their career. And also keep in mind, every single person who was tonight in the audience is also on that journey and may have tools and experiences to share with you as well, or even just be like a shoulder to lean on as y'all are going through this together. So Terry Connect can be a great place to put in the news feed. Hey, I was on the panel last night. Anybody else who joined, if y'all want to exchange information so that we can kind of bounce ideas off of each other, that's what that tool is there for. So again, thank you to everybody who attended tonight. Panel, once again, thank y'all so much for all of the perspectives that you shared. One of the other follow-up pieces we have is the panelists were kind enough to give some quick pointers about self-care as both medical students and people beyond medical school. So we'll be putting that resource together to send out to everyone who attended. But just once again, it's being recorded. We'll share the recording. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to the panel or feel free to reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to help connect you with someone who can help you get those questions answered. Panel, once again, just thank y'all so much. It's really been a pleasure working with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And please reach out. We mean it. Really, don't be shy. Reach out to us. We'll be so happy to hear from you because we were just in your shoes.
And a big thank you to Amber as well for being able to coordinate all of this. This is like a ton of logistics and
Yeah.
coordination, and it's not easy to do with all sorts of people. So really, really appreciate all the work that you put in as well.
Of
She's
course.
the
Well,
best.
I really enjoyed it, and I am just constantly inspired every single time I get together with a group of Terrys. I just leave so motivated and so energized. And like I mentioned to y'all, that hour passes very quickly. So I know we could have, you know, just filled multiple hours with all of the experience and insight that y'all have. So this is my favorite part of my job, definitely, is helping everyone make these connections. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and those of you that have somewhere else to be, of course, feel free to jump off. Those of you who want to unmute, turn your camera on and say hi to everyone else who was here, feel free to do that too. So thanks once again, y'all.